What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Welcome to day 205 of the 365-day graphic novel review challenge. If you will recall, yesterday I said that I was going to be talking about a book that was somewhat related to Hellboy but was not connected to Hellboy. And if you're looking at the title of this video now, you may be a little bit confused about what I was talking about. I am talking about Monkey Man and O'Brien. This was a 3-issue limited series, I guess, written and drawn by Art Adams, and this is part of the Legend imprint from Dark Horse Comics in the early to mid-90s. There were 3 books in this imprint, I believe. There was Danger Unlimited, there was Hellboy, and there was Monkey Man and O'Brien. And these 3 books were loosely part of the same world. You had references to each title in all of them. So in this book, we have brief references to Danger Unlimited. In the flashbacks in Danger Unlimited, we had Hellboy showing up in a flashback, and then in Babe, also written and drawn by John Byrne, we had Abe Sapien, who guest starred at one point, and then Hellboy was trained by the Torch of Liberty, who was a Captain America type character who existed in the back story of Danger Unlimited. So we had all these little references to these other books in the Legend universe when these series first started. And later, after this universe failed miserably, John Byrne went and said, no, it wasn't meant to be a new universe. It was meant to be a corner of a new universe where you would just see a little peek at what was going on in this universe, which to me, that's still a new universe. That's still what a new universe is. When you have 3 comic book creators all doing their own series that all reference each other, and you have characters from one book showing up in another, that is the beginnings of a new universe. Just because it didn't work out for you doesn't mean that it isn't a new universe. Now, one thing that I found very strange about this, both Mike Mignola and John Byrne felt the need to point out how slow Art Adams is at doing a comic book. And John Byrne especially is kind of a butthole like most of the time, so I thought that was just him being an anus whenever he said that in the foreword to Danger Unlimited. But then Mike Mignola said it also in one of the interludes in one of the Hellboy books I talked about, and I've always gotten the feeling that Mike Mignola is quite a bit of a nicer guy than John Byrne, so I thought that was very interesting that Mignola said that. And then I looked it up online, and these issues actually came out just one right after the other. It was, I think, July to September of 1996, and I thought, well, that's not too crazy. Like, they came out in a monthly fashion. But then I looked, and the other 2 books that launched the Legend universe came out about 2 years before this series did. Hellboy's Seed of Destruction and the 4 issues of Danger Unlimited that did come out, they actually came out in 1994, and this all came out in 1996. And this is only 3 issues, and Mike Mignola, I'm not going to say that he is a very fast artist. Usually he averages about 5 issues a year with whatever he's working on, whether it's a Hellboy story or a BPRD story. He doesn't usually do more than 5 or 6 issues, so I thought it was a little weird that he was commenting on how slow Art Adams was, but then I found out it took almost 2 years for Art Adams to do these 3 issues. I have no idea what could possibly have taken him so long to do this, or why it took him so long to do this. I don't know if he was still working at Marvel at the time. I know that he had done quite a bit of work at Marvel. He had done a little bit of Fantastic Four. He had done some X-Men annuals in the 80s before, I guess before Dark Horse Comics officially formed, and that is a good segue into my thoughts on this book, which you'll notice I haven't talked about a lot yet. I will go ahead and say that this book is a heck of a lot of fun. It is about this woman who has been given super strength and invulnerability, and she meets this guerrilla scientist guy named Axel Tiberius, and basically they are trying to find a way for Axel to go back to his home reality. He is here from an alternate reality where talking gorillas are the norm, and they are trying to find a way for him to get back home. That is the basic status quo here, and then they have various adventures while they're trying to find a way for him to get back home. It's a lot of fun. This is everything that you could possibly love about a goofy, silly comic book, all thrown into one 3-issue miniseries. It's amazing fun. It's not very original, though. If you recall, I said that Art Adams was doing work at Marvel before he did this. This feels like he took everything from Marvel that he ever worked on and then changed the name and threw it into this book. Starting with our main character, Anne O'Brien, she has an older sister named Okiko O'Brien, and these guys look and feel a lot like Polaris and Zoladane from the X-Men comics. Remember, Art Adams drew a whole bunch of X-Men annuals, and right around the time in the very late 80s, like 89 or so, Polaris, she was actually given super strength, and she actually grew about 1.5 feet taller than what she was. She no longer had the magnetic powers that she had originally. She had super strength, and this was right around the time where it was confirmed that Zoladane was actually Polaris' sister, and these two characters in this book look and feel a lot like those characters. Anne O'Brien acts a lot like Polaris did whenever Art Adams was drawing the character. Okiko is exactly like Zoladane. She doesn't feel like a new character at all. Her speech patterns here are a lot more reminiscent of Doctor Doom. She just kind of shows up at the beginning of the story and says, "Hey, I'm taking over your house. You can leave whenever you want." And then they both get caught in this explosion that mutates them. But she is basically Zoladane, and Anne O'Brien is basically Polaris. And I'm wondering if Art Adams intentionally did that, right down to the sister is a half-sister, and she grew up seemingly away from Anne because we are told that she left home 15 years ago, very similar to how Polaris and Zoladane didn't grow up with each other, and Zoladane is an evil warlord who has all these people working for her. Okiko O'Brien, she also has a criminal empire at her disposal. She's very similar. The character dynamic is very similar in my opinion. And then you have the bad guys of this book, who we can see on the back here. The first issue, we have the Shrumanoid, who is basically the Mole Man from the Fantastic Four comics, and then we have the Froglodytes, who are very much like a little-known group of adversaries that the Hulk fought in the 1960s called the Toadmen, and then we have this guy called Lord Quash. And I really like the Shrumanoid and the Froglodytes. They are silly and stupid, and they are tons of fun. They are like 200% awesome. They are meant to be silly. They're just goofy bad guys that Anne O'Brien and Axel Tiberius fight. They're not meant to be incredibly serious. They have really funny pun-based names. The Shrumanoid instead of the humanoid, Froglodytes instead of Troglodytes. It doesn't bother me that these guys are very clearly based on Marvel Comics characters that Art Adams is in love with. Quash has a really dumb name. It's not even based on a pun, it's just a stupid name. I wish that he had come up with something better for Quash. Also, he's not that interesting. Quash is very similar to the Annihilator, not the Annihilator, whatever the guy's name is in the Fantastic Four who lives in the negative zone, the bug guy. I cannot remember his name right now. He's not that interesting of a character here, and I'll be honest, I'm not a crazy fan of that character in the Fantastic Four comics, but he's basically a cross between Annihilus. That's his name, not the Annihilator. He's basically a cross between Annihilus and Darkseid. He's got Darkseid's Omega beams, but he lives in the negative zone. It's basically the negative zone. It's called the Terminus here, but he lives in the negative zone a lot like how Annihilus does. And he's basically that guy, and he is played up as being this really deadly serious bad guy, like a whole lot worse than the Froglodytes or the Shrumanoid, and then Axel and Anne O'Brien beat him very easily, and he doesn't nearly amount to as much of a threat as you thought he would when you're reading the first two issues of this book. Overall, I would say this series is a lot of fun. I know I've said that like 3 times by this point, but if you love the inherent goofiness of superhero comics with clones and time travel and alternate realities and talking monkeys and stuff like that, you won't find all of that here, but if you love that kind of thing, then you are definitely going to want to check out Monkey Man and O'Brien. This doesn't have a whole lot of connections to the other books that were part of the Legend imprint, which makes it good if you just want to jump in and then jump out and you don't want to read a whole bunch of stuff that is tying in with this. This has like one reference to Danger Unlimited, and other than that, this is pretty new reader friendly, which is good. I'm not going to say that this is especially highbrow. It's pretty lowbrow, and that's part of why I loved it so much. But if you like your comics to be quite a bit more serious, then you might want to give this one a skip. But overall, I would say that the best thing you can say about this is that it's a lot of fun. It's not exactly original, but reading this, for the most part, that didn't really bother me. The only character here that I wish that Art Adams could have done a little bit of a better job on would be Quash, both in terms of his name just being a dumb name, and also I wish that this villain felt like more of a threat than what he was. I'm not sure if this was intended to just be a 3-issue miniseries, or if it was intended to be an ongoing, because Danger Unlimited was intended to be an ongoing, and then John Byrne basically gave it a mercy kill because because people weren't ordering it and shops weren't ordering it. And this came out about 2 years after Danger Unlimited did, and by that point, Hellboy was already a roaring success, or at least much more so compared to Danger Unlimited and what eventually would become Monkey Man and O'Brien. But this book ends on a cliffhanger, and not in the same way that Danger Unlimited does. Danger Unlimited, when it ended on a cliffhanger, I was dying to know what happened next. With Monkey Man and O'Brien, I thought, okay, this is a really fun comic, but I don't have to know what happens next. It would have been neat to have seen what happened next, but it wasn't very high on my priority list, if that makes any sense. And I think that largely comes down to the premise that John Byrne was working with in Danger Unlimited was a lot more interesting than a whole lot of comics that I've read. If you look at the other half of that Danger Unlimited trade, we get about 6 issues of a character called Babe, and that didn't interest me as much as Monkey Man and O'Brien does. But with this, we get hints of this other bad guy who is possibly going to be even more of a threat than Quash was, and he doesn't get to do anything in this entire book. He's just hinted at the whole time, and the book literally ends with a to be continued, and then we don't actually get to see that be continued. I looked it up, and as far as I know, these are the only appearances of Monkey Man and O'Brien. If they appeared anywhere else, it was probably in another series that wasn't about them mainly, but as far as I know, this is all that we ever got with them. So if you don't like to see a story end on a cliffhanger and you do want some closure, this will bother you a little bit. But that's about all that I have to say about Monkey Man and O'Brien. I hope that you guys liked this video, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back tomorrow with a different video. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.